Hey, beautiful people, welcome back for our third session of Dialogue at Crossroads. And I'm still so grateful and happy to be part of this journey that we actually started like a couple of weeks ago. So, this is our third conversation together. I'm Kathy, by the way, and we are joined by this wonderful woman, a new set of understanding and a new perspective that we will be hearing from. So, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Of course, and thanks for inviting me, first of all. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Dominique. I'm from Italy. I was born and raised in Milan. I am half English, so my mom's from Manchester, so I've always, since I was little, I always grew up with two different cultures. I had the possibility to spend a lot of time in England when I was younger, so I've always been, interested and fascinated about exploring the world. And after my studies, I stayed in Milan until one day I said, okay, I'm just so ready to travel, and I left to go to Australia. So I spent 11 years in Australia, long time. So it's always, it's always interesting the way I feel when I say 11 years, because it was really a big chapter of my life, and it's been really wonderful. Those 11 years have taught me a lot. I've met amazing people. I kind of left Italy with the intention of exploring without knowing what I was looking for. I was just so ready to start from scratch, challenge myself, learn new sides of myself and my personality and my mind. So it was absolutely amazing. So in those years I've of course worked mainly in operations. That's what I did mainly. I've never been able to define myself in one category, or I think I tried, and at one point I just gave up, because I thought, okay, I have different skills, I have different interests, and I've just combined all of them. So that was kind of my path in Australia, trying to combine all the interests and skills and put them together. And Australia was the perfect playground for that. So I had a lot of space and a lot of freedom to experiment and do a lot of self-work and improve myself. So from that perspective, it was absolutely great experience. So yes, I worked in operations, team building, and then that is all the positive part of it. But on the other hand, I was of course trying to find my place in Australia. Without going to too many details, of course, to stay in Australia, you need to have you need to work hard to obtain your residency, and because I didn't know what I wanted at the beginning, I was just postponing. It was, of course, a bit of a longer journey. So when I decided to stay in Australia and started the journey of the residency, I found myself with a lot of challenges, with a lot of pain, with a lot of mistakes made. And after 11 years, I found myself still fighting to be part of the community. So I felt like I gave so much, and I was still not able to feel integrated. Of course, I had a beautiful life. My friends were amazing. That was what was important to me. But I knew that if I wasn't like stable and I didn't achieve this other part of it, then of course there was no future perspective for me. So I found myself to a point where I was like, okay, I need to work harder, invest another 3 years of my life and my time to achieve this ultimate goal. But I knew that I wasn't satisfied anymore. I wasn't inspired. I love to use that word. I wasn't inspired because I felt like I gave so much, and it wasn't me anymore. So I had this gut feeling, I had this voice telling me, you need to just, go out there and experiment more. Just reset my mind and connect with myself again, because I was ignoring this voice for a long time. And this is just to give you a little bit of background as to why I'm here today. And yeah, that was the kind of moment that shaked everything and made me think, okay, I'm ready to just make a decision, which was letting it go of that chapter, 11 years. I was kind of giving up. You know, I was looking at my life in Australia. I said, this is awesome. The people will be there waiting for me. But on the other hand, I cannot ignore how I feel. And I know I need to work harder to feel inspired with myself again and reconnect. You know how you feel. So I decided to leave. So I started traveling around Southeast Asia. And first few months were a bit chaotic emotionally. There was so much beauty around me, but there was chaos inside me. So it took me a few months to just readjust and find myself on the right path. Through people, through conversations like today, that I was able to, you know, highlight how I was feeling, what was important for me. And that's how we met, Kari, you know. I'm really happy to be here. I'm grateful because I'm able every day more to really acknowledge how I feel and use the tools that I've had, you know, and throughout my journey to be able to keep this feeling alive. You know, it's I always work on my consistency. I always work on my discipline, you know, because these are the elements that I know that are important for me to really keep myself on track. It's hard to, you know, feel inspired and feel so aligned and then just fall into the same mistakes. So, but I'm really happy at the moment because, of course, I know how hard I worked. And it feels so good to, you know, be able to share all of this with people that sometimes you just met. So you realize how much you have in common, how deep is this journey, which is life. So, no, it's been absolutely amazing.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful story.
I took you on a ride.
Yes, that was a beautiful journey. The ups and downs, that's what makes everything beautiful, you know. And that's also one of the things why I would love to I invited you here in the conversation that we're having. It's because we all have different perspective according to how our experiences molded us as who we are right now, and you imparted so much about it, and the conversation that we are having here will just flow as it is, and I know that it will always bring back like the value and the lessons from each of one of us. And yeah, I'm so happy. I'm grateful that you're here. And of course, we are also joined by two wonderful human beings around us. We have here Eva and Douglas, but I would love to hear, we have been in this journey for the past 2 weeks, I feel like. And is there anything that you know, come up in your mind about the previous conversation that we had, or just share whatever thoughts? Would you like to start, Eva?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dominic, for your very inspiring story. I mean, previously we were talking about self-awareness, self-acceptance, and what popped up in my mind while you were sharing your experience about how you felt when you were living in Australia, starting from scratch, you know, finding what feels like the authentic you. I thought that while speaking of self-awareness, I guess I'm going through trying to figure out, you know, how I feel, what's me while being here. So I came to Hoi An a month and a half ago almost, after I lived here for 8 months before. And like at this point by now, I realized that there is quite a big shift between what it was like when I came here as a traveler without really having any commitments, any plans. I thought, okay, let's see how it goes. Now that I've decided to stay, and I actually moved and I rented out my apartment, and I decided that, okay, like I'm not going anywhere anymore. I'm not going to live in this mindset that, you know, I'm leaving soon. I'm not leaving, I'm staying. And it's a totally different experience. And as we talked with Kathy, it when I was traveling, I pretty much felt like, I left some part of myself behind, and that's what I wanted to do. That was very liberating, and literally as I stepped out of the plane, like when I left Russia, it has nothing to do with Russia, but a new place, it put a smile on my face. I felt like I could breathe, and I felt this liberation all the way through. Then as time came to return, my anxiety really spiked, and as I was coming back to my home city, I felt like I was returning back to so much pain. I'm still not sure what exactly that was about, but now I feel like I brought it with me. So now that I've decided to stay, I feel like I'm not really, well, maybe I'm leaving less parts of myself behind. And yeah, I guess I'm trying to become more aware about what exactly it is that it is. But it's very interesting to observe this. Yeah, I guess this is what I came with today. Like, this is what's been happening on my mind lately.
That's actually what we are talking about since we started, about self-awareness and self-acceptance, right? And we all have these different journeys that we are taking. Life always takes us everywhere. And we mentioned about inner child, the needs that we had when we were a child, if it was met or unmet by our caretakers. And for myself, with the conversations we had, it made me reflect on how did my caretakers actually made me who I am, like planted the seed, and reflecting, who I am right now. And I've been really grateful about how my mom actually imparted so much when it comes to like loving unconditionally, even if I was looking at it in the beginning as in a lens of pain because of the lack, because I was focusing in it. But then with the conversation that we had the previous time, the realizations, reflections, the insights, everything that all came together in this one beautiful space that we're having, I realized that she imparted so much. And instead of looking into the lens of pain, I tried to really look into the lens of what she actually gave me out from how she knew about life, how she navigates life based on her own journey. And she did all her best to really support me to grow as who I am, and like freedom, too much freedom, but anyway. So Douglas, I would love to hear from you. We were talking about the inner child, the unmet childhood needs that we have, anything that, and I'm so happy to have you here again as our elder in this conversation, in this space. And yeah.
Well, as I'm listening, I'm also sort of sorting out, some of the themes that have already showed up in the ways in which Dominique presented herself and her story, and Eva's picking up from her experiences and how it is different this time than before, and and yes, also sort of what we've done already in terms of looking back on the influence of our upbringing and the formative years and those who had influence on that. What I heard is language around journey, path. Okay, and for me, this is actually a very helpful way to think about what life is. Okay, and we divide it so that we have those years where we're not free to be responsible for our journey, but rather there are adults in our life who have a lot to do with what that looks like, whether it's in a safe, nurturing, cultivated environment, or whether it's in a stressful, more difficult conditions, okay? So internally, we have our relationship to ourselves, and what we become aware of in terms of what that is. But most of us focus on the circumstances and the outer experiences that we're having. And particularly when we, like we have, walked away from the familiar, from the home base of our origins, our childhood, and we've become wanderers in a world that's bigger and different from what we've known before. We are engaging the outer world, the world around us, and we're influenced by the circumstances and the situations. So one of the divides in this conversation is related to our inner life and how it is that no matter where we are, we bring ourself, you know. And yes, we can leave some things behind or avoid certain things that we're maybe not ready to see or face, but we can't ultimately avoid what makes up our inner life. And self-awareness is the awareness of our inner life. Okay, and I say self-knowledge is kind of knowing who I am, and self-awareness is bringing that to the here and now. So being able to realize, what am I feeling? What's going on in my thoughts that are going to be helpful for me to live this journey, follow these paths, you know? So I do think our conversation will be sometimes on one side of that divide. What are the circumstances and the influences? And the other is, how do we know our inner life in a way that's maybe orderly or organized? And that's really what the attempt was in writing this book, to say, well, there's three primary parts to our inner life. One is emotion, one is thinking, and the other is our body. And they influence each other. When we have strong emotions, we have different thoughts. Our body is also telling us, oh, you're in danger, or you should be stressed, you know. So it's in the balance of those three things and the way that we understand the effect that they have on us that we gain the awareness to regulate. And when we regulate, then we're more consciously living from the inside out, from the person we are in the world that we're functioning. So this is the dance of life. How do we know ourselves and regulate ourselves so that we can experience the challenges of the world around us? So, yeah, and I think somewhere I read that the famous philosopher Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living, okay? Which means, yes, sometimes we need to go back to our early experiences to realize, how did they shape how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about life, and maybe the beliefs that came from that, or maybe even more importantly, the way in which we value who we are, okay? This is one of the most painful truths about humanity, is that we tend to diminish the value of who we are. Low self-esteem and low self-worth and self-criticism can be an unnecessary limitation in order for us to actually grow into our whole true self, our full potential. So, so yeah, where shall we pick up? Do you want to go back to some of the things we discussed last week about our childhood and the ways in which that influences us, or is there something perking about the here and now?
This space right now, I feel like it started already, how a lot of internal, not conflict, but something like boiling internally, and it's already coming up since we just started the introduction. And it's so amazing to see that every spaces that we hold, it brings up different energy and different vibe. But for me, I would love to tackle more about like reflecting or looking back into your past, how it could actually help you become who you are right now, because it seems like most of us are so not addicted, but are so like going through chasing the highs, which always see it like escaping what needs to be integrated. And I've been there myself. How important it is to really reflect, sit down, and digest everything that has happened and how it could affect you as who you are right now. Do you have any thoughts or that could?
So the term chasing the highs, do you relate to that, chasing the highs?
Yes.
A lot.
I guess.
Like I didn't give myself a space to get bored.
Yeah.
That was me like years ago. Just always like, okay, stimulation. Let's go here. Let's go there.
I feel like I can relate, but it's a slightly different mechanism. So I would work or study, like I would find something, like useful or productive to do. But I guess that it's, it serves a similar function. So it wasn't about stimulation. I mean, a different sort of stimulation, I guess.
Mental
Yeah.
stimulation. You're looking. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, to fill in the void. So that's very familiar.
Yeah, the mental and emotional stimulation for me has always been important, it's always been there. And I felt like I was translating that into like a lack of commitment, which sometimes is simply learn how to be bored or just to appreciate a different rhythm. So I found myself, especially last year that I spent in Australia, I kind of wanted to push myself to feel that way, where I was kind of stuck, of course, but I was taking advantage of that feeling of being bored, not stimulated. I think they're two different things. But in a second moment, I realized that that was kind of self-sabotage. It's a word that I've used a lot in that period of my life, because I realized that I wasn't just missing the highs. I wasn't stimulated and motivated at all. But then I wasn't even able to appreciate that period or get the most out of it because I was completely lost with myself. And everything for me was about criticizing my choices, the feelings, why I'm not able to make the right decision, what are my responsibilities. I was really worried about the outside world. And I defined that period really how really with the main word, which is really self-sabotage. So I wasn't able to analyze the feeling in a rational way. So as we know, sometimes it's good to be bored. It's good to live in with a different rhythm just because it gives you space to analyze in a different way. And I didn't have the tools. I didn't really have the perfect mindset to do that work on myself. So yeah, I feel like it's you need a lot of work and acknowledgement to use the tools that you have and you achieve throughout life. I'm actually combining a little bit of what you said before about guilt and self-awareness and criticism with the moments of those moments where we're chasing highs and we're chasing stimulation. I think they kind of like go side by side. Based on my experience, I was trying to work on both of these aspects, but I didn't manage to do it. So it's a really interesting reflection about how I felt back then. So it's good to really sit down and analyze how I felt, what I was feeling, without being stuck, but then really acknowledge with a positive approach how I feel now, who I am now, to be able to find again those stimulations and find again that rhythm. But definitely one of the biggest lessons has been to appreciate those moments where the highs are not always there.
It's like the times where you have to sit down and just really looking back into the journey, right? So how important it is to really sit down and digest, not just chase everything.
Well, without realizing it, we can become externally focused, chasing those things that are more desirable, the highs or the pleasure or the things that might be a compensation for what we actually feel. So if we go back to this primary question of the degree to which our needs were met, okay? So hypothetically, let's just say we had perfect parents and they knew all the right things to do, and they kept us safe, they gave us guidance, they taught us unconditional love and self-acceptance, they nurtured us, they saw us as separate and not connected to our behavior, our image. They really did all of the things that prepared us for adulthood, okay? Let's just say. Then chasing something is probably less likely, because my needs are met, I have validation. I'm okay. Now, it doesn't mean I might not have curiosities or interests, okay? Often when we put a lot of emphasis on highs is because we might be avoiding, without knowing it, the pain that comes from not having needs met, okay? So we're trying to create positivity because we're outwardly focused by simultaneously avoiding what Socrates says. It's time to reflect on yourself and what is true. You can't do it when you're 21 or 25 or even 28, okay? You can do it, but you don't have enough perspective to realize what you did or didn't get. Certainly we don't want to blame our parents because they did the best they could and they loved us in the way they knew how. So we're not trying to say, but yeah, we turn external. Now the other thing is, we're in a world that's very stimulating. Okay, the phone and everything, it hooks us into. And there's also experiences we can have with drugs and alcohol and that actually create highs that are quite phenomenal. And they expand what we realize is possible. And then that becomes quite desirable. So for me, the real equation is what are we avoiding? Okay, what's being avoided in the effort to be outwardly high, okay? And believe me, that's also promoted. Ambition, yeah, there's a lot of coaches and a lot of people talking, wow, you just haven't worked hard enough. Don't have enough ambition. I even heard the word grit. Well, if you didn't accomplish it, it's because you didn't get right down to the grit of it, which is very different than the dance between acceptance and will. Okay? Will is the application of our effort, but we should learn how to realize that if we're feeling frustrated and angry and anxious, that's a message to let go, to relax, to accept. We're not in control all the time. We need to make peace with the journey of life, not force ourselves into what that is, but to make peace with the circumstances and the situations. And the high then doesn't come from having a high experience, it comes from creating more peace, more okayness within ourselves. That's the foundation.
I just have like a quick question, Douglas. How will someone achieve that peace, that alignment within themselves? Is there...
Well, it's all of the things that represent the self-awareness and the regulation, the balancing this notion of will and acceptance. It comes from the prayer that's used in Alcoholics Anonymous. God, grant me the serenity, the peace, to accept the things I cannot change, the courage or strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay, this is how we find. I call it okayness. I'm okay. Does that mean everything is okay? No. That means I have found a place where I'm not pressing or stressing or seeking something outside myself. Okay, it's that validation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been wanting to ask you something. So you allow me a minute to formulate my thought because. So you mentioned, our goal is to learn to understand what's happening to us and at the moment and regulate it, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit more about regulation because it happens through the language.
Yes.
And we acquire the language from a caregiver. And if I'm not mistaken, the time when child kind of internalizes the language and becomes able to speak fluently and formulate thoughts, maybe not abstractions yet, but eloquently enough. That's also around the age where the superego is being formed, so that when the external rules, when the parent figure is being internalized, and that's the inner construct which allows us to self-regulate. Please correct me if I'm if I got something confused here. Hence my question is, we learn to self-regulate from our parents. Oh, well, two of them or one of them or caregivers, whoever is around to give that care. And the way I understand it, we take their patterns of self-regulation. So suppose a caregiver struggles with this balance, as you said, will and acceptance, because I feel suppose a person is traumatized, so they hold on to that, they grip to that willpower, because letting go, maybe they cannot bear letting go.
That's right.
Maybe it's they do need that defense, and they hold on to willpower. So in that case, the next generation, which has a much better external life, objectively it was so much better, but how do we make this shift from what was initially acquired with the caregiver, with the language of that caregiver, but maybe isn't those strategies aren't really working that well for us because the circumstances have changed?
It was absolutely poignant observation. Let's think of it this way. When we're born into the world, we're born into the reality that already exists. And we don't have an ability to go, let me compare my 3-year-old self to the experience another 3-year-old is having. We only know it as the reality it is. And so it becomes normal. Okay? And so if we have parents that are very capable of self-regulation and those things get communicated as a reality, okay, then that's what we learn, okay? And when we don't, when someone, for example, is carrying anger from their own childhood or the experience of life, and they don't regulate that, then that becomes our experience. So that becomes normal for us. The sad story is that's why often abused children become abusers, okay? Because that's what they know. You'd say, I got beat up as a kid, so maybe I'll make sure I don't do it. And there are many adults who do that. But unfortunately, it's also very true that is what's normal and familiar, and that is what hasn't been learned, the regulation of that. And therefore, that becomes the reality that is generationally handed along. And that's why the choice to be conscious, the choice to say, but we do all have the potential to look at ourselves to understand what those emotions are, and then to understand when it's at a level 5 and when it's at a level 7, and how I can respond to myself differently when I know what that emotion is and how much it's influencing. So regulation is the task of adulthood, is to say, okay, there's all these things that have affected me, but it's my job, and it's my adult parent to take care of my inner child in a way that teaches that inner child what it didn't learn the first time through.
I mean, this is what we had, the conversation we had last week, that the journey of life seems like we just need to learn how to reparent our inner child.
And why is that a hard thing to do? You know, to reparent, because we have to discover, oh, what does that mean? You know, I mean, I think your story is a good example of trying to figure out what is it that I can do? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a never-ending journey. As we were saying, I think that it all comes down to, as you're explaining it very well, to acceptance and acknowledgement. Yeah. Like being able to acknowledge how you feel, being able to really give space to what you need and what is important to you. That's the bigger step. I was listening to your experiences, and I was thinking that I found lately a lot more analyzing the relationship with my parents, or how everything shifted. And I'm 39, so I had enough time to analyze the relationship with my parents, which has always been successful. I was just curious to go back there to really understand a little bit more, maybe some pattern or why I was feeling that way. And I had a beautiful childhood. But it's true that growing and doing my own experiences and deciding to leave and go to Australia kind of like gave me enough space to listen to those voices, to work on my inner child, because that's a big playground, the world out there. So there's no one telling you what to do, or there's no one, it's just you, and you decide to be out there. So you do have those kind of set expectations from your past, from when you were younger. So you kind of hold on to them until you realize how powerful you are, and the beauty of playing with your own, dreams and feelings. It's a lot of work. But I found myself during this whole process holding on to those expectations, what was good for me, or what my parents expected me to do, or the responsibility. And that's, I think, the first step that is required to really letting it go and start a new work on your inner child. So there's a little bit of a break, there are different steps, but the biggest challenge for me is the acknowledgement. You hear it, you feel it, and that's the voice you want to listen to that will take you to the next step. And sometimes instead of listening, we just ignore it and we go back to that preset that we had. So yes, I think that acceptance and acknowledgement are two important tools to really nourish your inner child and just grow with it again.
So you mentioned, Kathy, at one point, the tendency towards perfectionism or holding high standards, and you're talking about expectations, and this is also part of what we can come to realize, is that we have that inner critic, that judge, that's measuring our acceptance based on approval of whether we meet these standards or these ideals or this perfection or not, okay? And of course, we're raised that way. We get grades in school for being well-behaved and performing well. We get praise from our parents when we demonstrate the performance that they want us to demonstrate. And acceptance really doesn't correlate with I have to be this good before I can accept myself. You see, acceptance is bringing things back down to we're human. And being human means we're wandering through life trying to find our way. And we're going to make mistakes because how would we know? We have some of the wisdom and the values that were passed to us from the past, but ultimately it's our journey, and it's very human to discover from our own experiences what has value. And so we have to be very careful about how it is we judge ourselves through these expectations, especially if they take on the form of perfectionism or black and white. I succeeded or I failed, okay? I was approved of or disapproved, okay? We have to see ourselves in the okay zone. Always room for improvement, but accepting ourselves is genuine examples of life being lived and learned, you know?
I just had a thought just now with you talking about not having that high standards just to get to accept yourself. For you, you know, when you achieve something, that's when, oh, I accept myself because I achieved that one.
Right.
But also, when you were talking about accepting the essence of you as who you are without anything, a word just popped up into my mind. It comes like self-forgiveness. Because it seems like, okay, you're just playing with life. It's the world out there is a huge playground. And of course, you will stumble. There's mistakes. There's a lot of things happening. And then if you are going to look back into it, of course, you will have this self-judgment, criticism, all this stuff, because you haven't met that expectation. And if you wanted to have that okayness, it sounds like you have to accept and forgive yourself for not being there and see it in a lens of like, I'm just a human. I need to go back to my essence. Correct me if I'm wrong, but seems like self-forgiveness also is something related to being okay.
Absolutely. I don't know who I'm quoting, but there's a famous quote that says, "To err is human, forgiveness divine." Okay, so this is a beautiful example of what you just said. Okay, we're going to stumble and fumble our way through life, making mistakes in terms of how it serves our best interest, our wellness or not. Okay, self-sabotage is, I'm trying to attain my wellness, but somehow I keep undermining what that is, you know. So you're absolutely right. The essence isn't our behavior. We could call it our spirit, the life force that's living through this particular organism that happens to be this one or that one or that one or that, you know. And to allow that to happen without constraining it and judging it. So here's the thing about expectations or standards. It's like in the olden days, they didn't have a Google map, right? They would point to the North Star and they would say, okay, we're going to follow the path that is guided by something, okay? But they didn't fail by not reaching the North Star, okay? In other words, yes, we can have expectations and standards and values. Values are the best version of that, okay? But to realize that that's always ideal and that we are real. And so we keep aiming in the direction of that, but we don't judge ourselves from failing to be that, you see? And so it serves us because we guide ourselves in the direction of our values. But we forgive ourselves for being the human being who doesn't yet know all of the ways in which life is takes shape. You know, and I guess I can say it now because I'm an old man. You know, I'm 70 in my 70s. You know, and I can say to a 28-year-old, well, you're really kind of at the beginning of understanding what these things are. How would you know? You know, it's an early part of adult life. You know, and to accept that, yeah, there's a lot to learn. Okay, and there's no point at which we can't learn what's next. You know, I really have trouble when people are saying, "Oh, I'm already this," and you know, it's like, oh, you're just beginning. You know, you never know. I feel like I'm in the beginning. You know, and I don't know what comes after life. You know, but this is the open-minded perspective to say you live and you learn. Okay, and you forgive as you go.
I have a question slash thought, I guess, that I want to share. I really loved your example with the North Star, and as you mentioned, like this, it is unattainable, but not having it at all would result in being completely lost. So we need some ideal. I guess my question is, you know, is there a pitfall, like, well, if self-acceptance come and I say, okay, so I'm okay the way I am, I'm going to let myself be like this, I'm going to forgive myself, I'm going to make my peace with that. Is there at some point a pitfall that if an individual isn't functioning well enough and they accept the situation the way it is, they will just drown in it, and, you know, without any application of willpower, it will result in, well, a sad ending for that person. Or to be honest, I have a feeling that I'm still perceiving this whole situation, and then maybe not in the wrong way, but from this willpower perspective, like maybe there is another angle to look at it. And hypothetically, if a person is given a fostering enough environment, they don't have to apply that much willpower, and then they can just grow. But in the real world, it is a privilege to have such an environment. I feel like Hoi An is one, and it's a huge privilege to be here. But so often it so happens that, yeah, the environment isn't supporting and it isn't fostering, and it's actually pretty demanding. And like, to what extent is it okay to let go? Is there a risk of ending up, you know, in even a worse situation?
It's a fundamental question that I think most of the psychologists like Freud and Jung and Karen Horney and Maslow and, you know, is in the base, are humans meant to fulfill the biggest force of what that is. Now we look at children, and children don't sort of question being alive. Okay, they're alive. You mentioned being alive. This is, but yeah, we can get to places in our adult life where we become depressed in ways where the life energy becomes diminished, and we then see more of what's difficult, and particularly if we lose some guiding influence. That's when I talked about the North Star as a guide. The sense is that we are better off when we have things we're aspiring toward. Okay, now it can be a goal. I don't actually like the word goal. I like the word intention, because it includes a lot of things that are outside of our control, and it doesn't narrow the scope so much of what we're doing. But even more, I like the notion of our values, because it's not then based on some arrival point. It's based on how do we live our daily life. How does it line up with what matters most? Do we bring care and compassion and kindness into the life that we're leading? Or is it so targeted at something else that we lose some of what that is? the idea of balance between acceptance and willpower is always meant to bring us back to living in the present, okay? Being future-minded will take us out of the present, and we'll focus on that expectation or that goal, something that's out there. And all of what I'm thinking, it has to do with how do we bring it all into here and now. Another way of saying that is from the foundation of self-acceptance. I'm already okay. I don't need to be someone or something else, okay? Now I can blossom from that place of self-acceptance. You know?
No, you've used so many, important words. 2 minutes of embracing all of this. There are a lot of thoughts, that actually are dancing together as you speak, because you really use strong words. As intention, direction is another word that I really like to use, and values. When you were questioning about how to really master or listen to that voice or understand what your direction is, that takes time. Actually, that investigation will never end, as we know. I think with, through your experiences, as you're getting older, you master the tools that you've gathered along the way. And what I've learned is how to welcome the storms of emotions. The storms are always there, no rain, no rainbow. That's what I always like to say. So once you realize that, you will go through that and you will feel lost, you accept it with a more open heart. And really, as you said, the fundamental, everything will go back to your values. I've learned this, I've discovered this even more and more, the importance of understanding that, yes, you can go out there and search and get lost and question about life and what's important, but life is so simple. When you realize that what it really matters is what is important to you. I always go back to people, to principles, to values, and this is my core. Once I have that as a reference, everything else, the dance of life, it's lighter. So having a direction and feeling, listening to that voice and to the guts is probably the key of the journey. Then we'll get lost. I still get lost. I thought, I'm old enough to, be in a safe place and strong, and then no, I actually kind of enjoy getting lost. Otherwise it'll get a bit boring, and then, but yeah, mastering, using those tools and welcoming those emotions, I think is a really important step, which of course is part of acceptance and, acknowledgement. But it's a never-ending story, correct?
Never-ending story, yeah.
And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And when you think and then you hit an emotional storm or circumstances that create conflict, then you are like, okay, now I get to use what I think I know, and we do that with greater or lesser ability, and life doesn't promise that it's gonna just become this easy ride. I think it's actually adventure, which means you never know what hardship or difficulty can occur. For me, I think with time, I've just become more confident or comfortable that I can handle what it is, and that comes. Okay, and it doesn't mean I would desire or like all those things, but living true to ourself is in the life that we discover. It's ours,
So Douglas, if you said that you know that you can rely on yourself, whatever comes in life, it means self-trust, right? So when there's self-trust, how can someone cultivate that strong self-trust and not get lost about, oh, someone will save me, or oh, I don't have enough strength to really trust myself that if I do this, and if it won't happen or it won't work, I won't be lost. I won't be so devastated. Is that like? I mean, it's a journey, but how will you?
Well, I think that, you see, as children, we need to trust adults, primarily our parents. And so, yeah, we scrape our knee and we call for our mom, It's someone to soothe us, someone that holds that ability to care and show compassion for our pain and those things that we need. And the more that that's happened in our lifetime, the more that we internalize that ability for ourselves. Okay? And so we become our own parent, And self-soothing is part of trusting that we can handle what it is that comes up. Now, does that mean we should be isolated individuals who don't need anyone? No, I don't think so. I think we need each other. But there's a difference between need and needy. Okay, so if I'm a grown man who still needs someone, sometimes I substitute a wife for a mother, something like that, then that's not bearing the responsibility for myself, okay? So we do need each other. We are human beings who are socially inclined, and it's necessary but bearing the responsibility is to say, well, in the end, no one can do this for me. I'm the one who has to do it.
Well, it also boils down to like the needs of a child, because right now the word autonomy comes up. Like, how much autonomy did your parents give you to build that self-trust? But how much autonomy can they provide you so that you won't be like, okay, I can do this alone? Not so much freedom, still have the guidance and the structure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah.
How prepared are we, I could say, was I for autonomy? And I think my story is quite interesting because as a kid, I happened to live at a time and in a neighborhood where we'd come home from school and my mother would say, get out, go play in the neighborhood. Okay. And there were no adults, and there was a pack of kids. And we had great games, kickball and bombardment, and every day we're playing like kids. And I think that, without knowing it, that's probably the greatest gift that they gave me. It is because in that play, I discovered who I am, okay? And I discovered who I am in a pack of other kids, How do we play fair, and what do we do when somebody's being... So I think I grew up and gained a sense of that when I was a kid. Now, the other thing is, I told you in the first session that around the age of 18 or 19, I made a fundamental decision that what I was brought up to believe wasn't congruent with my own perception. And it was a pretty radical decision to leave the church because we were taught to obey and comply and to not trust our own ideas, but to follow and somehow I just hit this point where I couldn't do it. So even though I wasn't really prepared for that autonomy, I had taken it. And I fumbled my way through my 20s, not knowing who I was,
I have thank you for sharing. This is so interesting. I'm just realizing that we have kind of the opposite perceptions of what the dependency is here, because I mentioned before, I had quite a lot of autonomy as a kid. It didn't feel like agency, but there in fact was a lot of autonomy. And I had complete lack of faith in myself. I even remember, like, when I was around 18, I came to school to to find out the results of my exam, one of the finals, which affected a lot in my future, like what kind of university I can get into. And I was shaking and crying to the point that I actually took my brother that you guys have seen now. He's taller than me, but he's 10 years younger, so he was like 7 at the time or 8. And I clung to him for moral support. Like, I was that devastated. I lacked faith in myself that much, and my teacher looked at me and she was like, you worked in different countries alone at this age. How come you have so little confidence in yourself? And later, a little bit later in life, when I started reflecting on my relationship with religion, so I'm not from a religious family, so I have sort of the opposite situation here. It occurred to me that, there might be some correlation between having faith in God, like, having I'm not sure if it's about the cognitive capacity, but, for the psyche, for the whole psyche, to have a capacity to have faith in something. I lacked that capacity. And, I came to a conclusion that it must have affected my capacity to trust in general. Like, I'm from an atheistic family, so I've never thought that there is something. I still struggle with construing the idea that there might be something, like a God. So this is very counterintuitive to me, like on the physiological level, the whole idea feels counterintuitive. And I figure that it might have affected the fact that I have a problem with faith in general, including self-trust. And autonomy didn't help. If anything, I feel like it felt like it was too much and I was doomed
Too much too early.
Yeah. So I'm just curious here, what are your thoughts on these, like, dependencies, interdependencies?
So, guidance is the right balance between structure and freedom. Okay, and actually they would kick me out and I would have the freedom, but I come home to the structure. And having a lifestyle based on going to church on Sunday and going to the catechism on Wednesday and praying before the dinner was structure. Okay, regardless of what the beliefs were, my family lived their life based on a set of routines and structural expectations that came from that community, that way of functioning. And I think that's one reason why religion continues to hold up, is because it represents community. It represents a safe kind of lifestyle where people know who each other is, and they have the community that's based on those common ideas. Okay, now we can debate as much as we want about how true they are or whether, but I think there's Alain de Botton wrote a book, Religion for Atheists, and he basically talks about all the benefits that come along with being part of a religious community. So I think, that struggle that you described is one between the structure, the lack of structure. So you had autonomy before you were developmentally ready for that. And that's why you felt overwhelmed at certain times when you're going to be measured or when there's something that would represent some feeling of success or failure. Then, so I think, and I think you're right, religion may have been something that might have offered that in your life. I mean, it's only hypothetical that we can imagine that, but I think it does. Religion can serve as a guideline for the way people live their life,
Yeah, and I think like structure and guidance, of course, is really important. And I consider myself lucky enough because, of course, as I mentioned before, I had a great childhood and a lot of freedom. And I had to go back to that feeling of freedom because at one point I was kind of like lacking the guidance or maybe the exchange or maybe the communication with my parents, because I always consider me as like, I was so grateful to be able to spend time in England and having also two parents. My mom's English, so Ate my dad is from the south of Italy, so it's really traditional, so really black and white. They still love each other, but I grew up with this contrast, also values and opinions. It's always been a dance of contrast that worked really well. But at the beginning, being able to spend time in England when I was younger, having a lot of freedom in making mistakes. I didn't realize it back then because I was younger, but it's true that when I look back, I had parents, especially my mom, who was always able to put me in front of a decision, whether there was pain, whether she would never really maybe, how can I say, trying to assist me with a decision. So she gave me a lot of freedom. But when I was maybe, 16, 18, I kind of felt a little bit of lacking guidance because I wanted to have that even dialogue or exchange. Not that it was anything wrong, it was just the way she probably dealt with situation with parents as well. So it was beautiful from her end to give me a lot of freedom, but then in the long run I realized that I found it was a good training, for what was coming, because you find yourself in analyzing, making a lot of mistakes with relationship and not having anyone really to maybe stop you or judge you or just observing. So with time I understood more what happened there and how I built the relationship with my parents and the autonomy and freedom that I had, which I was grateful for because they built, I consider myself like I have a strong mindset, and I think those periods, those choices, those mistakes have a lot of, have contributed to this for sure. But then there's always, when you observe it, there's always that kind of like acknowledgement of kind of feeling a little bit of lack. It's never going to be a perfect balance. We know that. Sometimes you have a lot of guidance, sometimes too much, sometimes you have a lot of structure and you want to escape. So I think I had a good balance, but I realized that what made me stronger and more powerful was also being able to throw myself out there and make a lot of mistakes and just being accountable for my decisions. So I've recognized that with time. I think I was suffering a little bit along the way because I thought, why no one is, jumping in and interfering or giving me advice. And then I realized, okay, I've got this. And that was useful, for the rest of my journey. So
There's many stories. I used to work with teenagers, and there's many stories about those years, the ending of childhood towards the preparation for adulthood. And it's that dance between structure and freedom that can sometimes become very serious conflicts between parents and kids. So the way I think of it is that, let's just say it's 100 pounds, 100, from childhood to adulthood. And the job of the parent is to pass that weight to the child. So in the first year, they get 1 pound or 2 pounds, okay? And over the course of childhood, they've gotten 100 pounds, okay? And the key is two things. Number one, do the parents pass that along? And number two, does the kid accept it? Let's call that responsibility. Do they accept the responsibility that's commensurate with their age, their developmental step? So too much, too early is going to be too hard. Not enough, okay? So I used to have, the kids that came to me were kids who were not doing well in school, who were trying all kinds of things that were getting them in trouble. And instead of the parents letting go and giving them more and more, the parents were freaking out, going, oh, I'm not going to let this kid out the door because I don't trust what he's going to do. So he's losing the freedom at a time when he's supposed to be getting the freedom, you see? And it becomes a big war, and then finally it's like, okay, you're 18, you're out of here, you're on your own, you're free, you do what you want. And of course he's not prepared for that either. So that's why teenage and adolescent can be quite difficult. And yes, you actually wanted more from your mother, but she was saying, no, I mean, you're growing up now. This is the time to make decisions.
Also because she left when she was 17, young, and again, Anglo-Saxon culture, different emotions, the way I'm dramatic. I want it all, you know, and my mom is like frozen. We have a beautiful relationship, but I learned how to maybe translate those her way, you know, understanding more. And so the transition sometimes it's not smooth, but I think she did great in giving me a lot of freedom with strong values. You know, I had the structure, I knew what her background was, and that was always a sense. When you're 18, you can go, you can do whatever, and I was ready. I was like, yeah, I was like, oh, maybe I'll wait a little bit longer.
Every 18-year-old thinks they're ready. Yeah.
And that's some sort of expectation you grew up with. Oh, 18, I'm ready for, you know, discover the world. But yeah, the more structure you have, the more stability you build, the better tools you have to go out there and discover the world. So you need to let it go, obviously. So
I think guidance, when I look at, last week we named the 7 needs, and I think guidance, there's a lot of room to talk more about what that is. It is that handing off of responsibility in the right sort of balance. And, you know, it's not something that usually happens in a perfect way. It either becomes, you know, too little, or the kid doesn't accept it, or, you know, there's all this kind of way in which we're not fully prepared for what it means to then have full autonomy as an adult. And that's why the 20s is often we stumble through going, okay, now, you know. And we eventually start to get our balance, and we start to realize, okay, this is, it's up to me now. You know, I'm the one who...
And the transition can be smooth, you know, when you have good guidance and good structure, that transition is smooth. But when it's not, then that's when you struggle to understand, okay, I need to listen to how I feel. You don't really have tools. So I found a lot of, like, you know, family members, even when we were younger, struggling a lot more to understand, okay, I had no guidance, no structure, very maybe messy sort of journey when they were younger. So when they found themselves in charge and accountable for the decision, they were like, okay, how do I do this? So of course it's more difficult, it's not as easy to really put in practice, you know, what you've learned, because maybe you haven't got a really good structure behind. But I have always found along the way that the key is also experimenting. You know, you'll never have the perfect answer. No. So you grow up thinking, okay, you need to know what you like and what you want to do. Just choose one, and that's it. I remember that, you know, I grew up with this concept. You're going to choose one and do that for the rest of your life. I was like, wow, sounds fun. Of course, I didn't stick to the plan, but that for my parents, that went down to, you know, values and principles. You need to work hard and find your way, which it's good to be ambitious and have dreams and study, but then I will change as I go. So yeah, I mean, it's you know, we are continuing to evolve. So it's a challenge that is out there for us, no matter what.
Let's pick up on that idea, because I see this a lot in different cultures. But the idea is that we should pick something, we should work hard, we should stick to it. There's a script of how to live. In Vietnam, it's pretty clear script. And that will be the structure. That will be the guide for a life that then becomes secure. But it might be based on a fear. Okay, so when we look deeper under why we would script our life to follow a path, it might be because we're afraid of not surviving. Okay, and when a culture has been through years of survival, it makes sense that they're going to be more conservative in the way that they assure survival, even when it's not really the issue anymore. Survival isn't a question, but sticking to the script is a method. So there's often conflicts between parents who say, we know what you should do and this is what you should follow, and younger people that are going, but I want to explore. I want to be changing as I go and figuring out, and that conflict can happen. So I always look to say, is it fear-based? You know, this is where scarcity and abundance and fear and confidence. And if it's fear-based, then we have to go, okay, but yes, there's a value in fear because it's telling us there's a danger. But we don't want to be afraid of something that actually isn't a danger, right? We don't want to be afraid when reality is that we can discover a lot of things and we will be okay.
But it's, yeah, thank you. My question here is, isn't it to some extent still a valid fear? Because, I mean, if we don't follow the path which is traditional in our cultures, of course we can figure out a new way. I mean, okay, even of course kind of sounds presumptuous. It is possible, but it takes much more time, much more effort, much more like resource, which again distracts the person from other important tasks in life which they could be otherwise doing. Well, I have some people I know my age who have a child already, and I mean, I don't want to devalue that. That's a very important task. And I myself realized that there is a possibility that I might never have it in my life. And in that case, there will be a huge amount of grieving. So the thing is that, isn't this a valid fear?
I think it's aligned with the values you have, okay? And so for someone that might be a fear because it keeps them from living the life that they would want. And for another person, it might be an invalid fear because they want to explore all the ways. You know, I think of artists or people that are discovering what to express is quite different than something that's more scripted, where people are sort of complying with expectations. Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right to say, well, if having a child is a priority, then absolutely I need to secure a life that allows me to raise that child in a way that is responsible. I think it's the greatest responsibility that we have in life. If we have a child, we are responsible. This is all of what we're talking about. For that period of time, we have the responsibility to be sure, to whatever degree we can, that child's needs are met, because they can't. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned values, that it all depends on the values. And, well, I mean, having a child is a very, I guess it's one of those biologically determined universal values. So almost everybody has this value. If we talk about other values and other paths, we can't have a system of values which which is idiosyncratic to us and unique to us. Like, the values need to be shared by some community. Like, it cannot exist within just one individual. So I guess that exploration is great if there is a chance to find such a community. For example, Hoi An seems to be a wonderful place with a lot of support. But if a person cannot find a community that shares their values, I feel like it's an extremely painful and maybe even unattainable task, to have a different path while being surrounded by people who don't share the values. And I mean, in this case, it seems to me that it kind of makes sense to, to shift perspective. Of course, it is also very painful, and I guess it might, jeopardize the whole sense of self. But if there is no other alternative, yeah, I mean, I'm just sharing my thoughts here.
I wanted to kind of share my story when it comes to sticking to the path or like finding yourself, because as what I've mentioned in the previous conversations, like I grew up born and raised in Asia, in the Philippines, where there's a really clear structure. I always call this one like societal bucket lists, checklists to check, and it's so clear. I mean, it's general. I have traveled, I have seen people, and it's the same. It's not just about us, but it's just so clear for us. I grew up in that sense, but also kind of like rooting into my inner GPS, because I was given too much freedom, and I built that strong self-trust, let's just say, or having that trusting that there's someone above us. So with regards to what you're talking about, not being in a community that aligns to your value, feels like, yes, not being able to relate, and you won't get enough support to go through whatever you're going through. I feel like I was really drowning so much because I was still in that same state. So it was painful. I was drowning and fighting for my own individuality. I was fighting for my, like, okay, this is what I value. But it took me like years to realize that, okay, I don't fit here anymore. So I have to be courageous enough to go out there in the world and find my way. And that took me to my journey of, let's say, discovering myself, individualizing, and got to a point where, I have all this sense of self-knowing, the awareness. Now, what's my value, and where does this value will take me to connect to the right people? There's always going to be right places, but the people who values the same. But in that sense that you were talking about, okay, the fear of stepping out from that structure, will it lose that sense of self? That sense of self that I had, that I was trying to prove from the wrong community, was actually a false sense of self. A self of myself, like an image that was built according to how my parents want me to be, or how that society wants me to be. But the sense of like the inner GPS was strong enough because of how I was molded, and I followed that. But it was painful to accept that, what I was presented was not the right feeling for myself. So I have to grieve. I have to lose that. But it also brought me to a space where I feel like I can relate to whatever you're talking about, like, having all this freedom, having these choices of how I can live the life that I want. Because for the people who still stick, I mean, there's no right or wrong on how you can live your life. But my friends, my colleagues who are still in that state, I feel like, they don't see life as a choice. They don't really have that enough agency to live the life that they want, because they're too afraid to let go of the structure that they were presented. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I would really love for this conversation to go. It brought us to a very beautiful flow today. So I feel like there will be next sessions coming up, a fourth one. But any thoughts or insight that we can contribute before we will end this conversation we have today, or?
Well, I agree. There's a certain kind of flow, and that out of what we're sharing about our personal experiences, we're also being able to see kind of a roadmap or a way in which it fits into a kind of a schema of how these things work. And for me, there's a real, it helps me to relax into my life more when I realize, okay, there is an order to this. There are these things that we discover along the way. There are continual questions about when does fear determine the choice I make, or when is it a risk I'm willing to take? There's all these points where we integrate the awareness that we have into the life that we have. And so I think it's a very rich and real conversation, and I deeply appreciate that each of you brings yourself and the story that is relevant to this conversation.
Is there any takeaway or insights that I think it would be best if each of us could add some insight or reflections or takeaway before we end this conversation? And
I mean, it's been such an inspiring, exchange and conversation that we had today. And I take a lot with me, to be honest. It's so interesting to hear everyone's story, and so honest, in such a honest and organic way, that I definitely realize how much in common we have, how much we share this never-ending search of, whether it's adventures or whether it's the self-love, and it's good to know that, of course, we're not alone. And again, regardless, no matter how old you are, no matter where you're from or what your background is, we really like share the essence of life together. And as much as it's important to grow alone and nourish your soul and understand your values, we are really stronger together. So I'm happy to really being able to be myself and share all of this with you as well. And I've learned a lot, also more about myself. It's good to express and put a lot of topics to surface, because it's a give and take experience. Yeah.
okay, what's right and wrong? It's like cultivating that internal voice and not really suppressing it down because of like some expectations or standards that I have to meet just to feel good. But I don't know, but that's what I can say for today.
Yeah, well, to continue, about being, being surrounded by people who have lived longer than I greatly appreciate. I greatly appreciate my company and the fact that I can learn from everybody. This is very precious. Thank you. And the theme that I heard today from all of you, I believe, is about getting maybe not comfortable, but getting strong enough to withstand their uncertainty and welcoming that, rather than trying to restructure it into some sort of familiarity, some sort of order as soon as it appears, without actually letting yourself to be in this moment of uncertainty. So this is something I have yet to learn, because that makes me feel extremely uncomfortable. And this feeling of having strong emotions and not being able to understand what they're about, because developmentally I used to suppress my emotions, I guess, or rationalize. So I'm not very much used to actually being aware of them and experiencing them strongly. So that part is new. And being able to still be around people in this time rather than isolate myself. So that is another challenge. Learning to navigate it and not try to run away whenever that happens. This is also something to learn. So yeah, it has been very insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Douglas.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable to put ideas into the space that we share, and to recognize how often they are compatible, and they bring us an understanding. And yeah, I do feel a particular honor, or for me, it's a gift that you give me that allows me to share what it is I've learned. And I don't apologize for having lived long enough to share some of these things. And if they're of value, then that's exactly what I would hope. So, and I also take away from each of your experiences and the ways in which you're sharing where you are and what you're learning. It also teaches me about life, and so I hope we keep going and we can do it again.
Yes, in the next, yeah. So for this conversation, this is the ending. As much as we wanted to talk, we can talk as long as we want, but we have also like personal commitments to do. So I'm so happy and grateful for each one of us here. I know that there's still one more sessions to come, because a lot of concepts came up from within this space, and it's beautiful. Yeah. All right. That's it. That's the ending for today.
Okay.